So I realized that I have spent a lot of time in my life being scared of birds. But I also realized that I'm not really scared of birds anymore. And I have now, I've kind of identified more as like a bird admirer or a bird watcher or a bird person, but like I wouldn't necessarily call myself a birder yet. Like I'm getting there, but I wouldn't count myself as one quite yet. So I started thinking about what changed for me. Like, how did I go from being someone who was ducking and running away from birds to really liking them, really admiring them? What would I tell my past self if I could for getting over these fears faster? So I want to be mindful that with this video, if you're watching this, you may have much more of a severe fear of birds than I had. Ornithophobia is the phobia of birds or things related to birds. So it actually can be a medical diagnosis. So if it's something that's quite debilitating, it can actually be enough to be classified as a phobia disorder in the DSM-5. So this can be very legitimate. And like in my case, I don't think I felt that debilitated with it. Like it was something that like at times would be worse than others, and with certain birds it would be worse than others, but I won't say that I feel like I had enough to like warrant a DSM-5 diagnosis for it, but I was scared of birds. So just to say, I understand that if you have a more severe fear than I even had, that some things can be very triggering. And so I'm not going to use pictures of birds or videos of birds in this video because I want to be mindful that that could be triggering for some people. But just, I will be talking about things that may be a little scary to think about. So just, yeah, I guess be mindful of how you're feeling. You can always watch a little bit of this and come back at some other point, because I will be kind of talking about facing some of my fears and like things that I was specifically scared of and ways to kind of logic them out by learning more about them. I just wanted to share some of my experiences. I am by no means a professional in overcoming fears or anything like this. It's just from my experiences in doing some looking things up online. So, I guess we'll start off by just going into some of my background with like my fears. So my feelings about birds have really varied through my life. Like as a kid, I can't remember being scared of birds. I remember like I had a neighbor who had a pet goose, and I would feed this goose, and I liked seeing this goose. I can remember feeding ducks, which I now know is not a good thing to do. But like when I would hang out with friends who had birds, I never really got it. Like I never really liked the pet birds. The weird thing is I actually asked for a pet bird when I was like 8, I think. I was like at a pet store and I was like, yeah, I think I want a bird. And then my mom said no to the bird and then agreed to me getting a gecko, so I got a gecko. But like there was a point where I could have had a pet bird, maybe, if my mom actually agreed, or if my dad just didn't listen. So there was a possibility of me bringing home a bird, but I don't really understand why I wanted that bird at that point, because I don't remember ever, besides that one day, like having a desire to have a pet bird. At some point in my teenage years, I started to get this like fear of birds pooping on me. So I would kind of like, if I saw birds running or like flying over me, I would get like freaked out and kind of run away. And then over years, I feel like my fear of birds pooping on me kind of eventually evolved into a stronger fear of like birds pecking at my skull or like landing on my head or like attacking me. And I guess part of this was probably because I did have exposure to like being around a lot of geese. And I know that they can sometimes be a little bit aggressive or territorial, especially around nesting season. So I have never been attacked by a goose, but the idea of it freaked me out. And then also I had been dive bombed by a bird. So that really freaked me out. It was like it was on a path that I had to take to get to work. And I couldn't really like avoid that path very well. So this bird like kept on coming down at me like nearly every time I would go on that path for a while. And that definitely freaked me out. And I also definitely did not know how to deal with that at the time. So I probably didn't make it any easier on myself, to be honest. So yeah, those were kind of the main fears. And then it just kind of like bubbled in my mind, and that was just something that kind of stuck with me for a while. I honestly did not seek out to really change my mind about birds. I think I just did a lot of things that in retrospect made a big difference. And I think that's how a lot of changes don't happen quickly necessarily. They don't necessarily happen intentionally. But if I break them down into looking back, I can find things that I definitely think contributed. So that's what we're going to go through now. So some things that I think helped me. Number one was positive interactions with birds. So I started to realize over time that I was having more positive associations with birds than negative. And that just comes from exposure. That comes from just acknowledging how many birds can be around us, just like on our day-to-day lives, and how few are going to even give a hoot about you. Or if they do, they're more scared of us. Like they're just gonna peace out, or they're just gonna hang out and they're just gonna do their thing, and you mean pretty much nothing to them. So yeah, just having experiences with birds that weren't trying to harm me, that weren't being aggressive, really helped. So the more experiences that I had with birds, the more that ratio of like concerning bird events and things that just happen every day, like the concerning things just paled in comparison number-wise to all of the neutral or positive experience. It is so important to get these positive exposures to birds in safe ways. Number two is living in an area where I could observe birds from a safe distance. So I would suggest like one of the first things to kind of get more comfortable with birds is just observing birds through a window or through some sort of a protected area where you can see them. You see like some just flying, doing their thing, eating, whatever. Just watch for them. Like if you're in a car, if you're driving, if you're a passenger, if you're in a car and you're a passenger, maybe like try and keep an eye out for seeing birds, see what they're doing. So just having that distance to be able to observe and slowly like understand them a little bit more without like being so close that it could trigger a fear response was very helpful for me. Number three was just me spending more time in nature and being more intentional about going for walks on trails and places that birds are just going to happen to be. So kind of similar to that positive association thing, I was building up my exposure to birds, and I was also seeing different birds, and I was like starting to get more interested in them, like seeing different varieties, seeing different species, seeing how like there's so many little cute tiny birds and really big like cool fishing birds. Like just seeing this variety got me really interested in like observing birds and making a note of what I saw. So just by being exposed in a positive environment where I'm choosing to go on these walks, and I know there's so much benefit to being in nature, and this is something that I just enjoyed. I would see more birds, started to pay attention to my surroundings, noticing birds more around there, and then I also started to like soak in these hints about how they behave. And then number four, kind of already touched on this, is learning about birds. So I think learning is so important for changing our perspective on things, and by slowly exposing yourself to more information about how birds behave, about different birds that exist in your area, and learning fun facts, honestly, is huge. I'm probably going to do a separate video on like fun facts about birds that I thought were really annoying or was scared of, because I think learning about birds and learning about like how cool they are and how many like quirky little facts different birds have got me way more interested in them. So just having that interest sometimes helps to take away how we can imagine things in our head. Like things can be scarier we know less about them. But like learning a little bit more about them can sometimes make it less scary. And that's from my experience. Yours may be a little different, but I do implore you to try to learn a little bit more about birds in a way that works for you. So the next thing we'll go into here are my tips for how to get to know a little bit more about birds. So I really think that learning and getting positive associations while you're learning is really important. So one thing I will recommend, and I kind of talked about this already, is observe from a distance. So find a place where you feel safe observing birds and just pay attention to things that you probably may have even ignored. Like if you have a specific fear to like specifically just birds that are like flying over your head, try and pay attention to other birds. Like there are other birds existing that maybe you actually have not paid attention to. I did not realize how many birds I totally ignored until I started caring more about birds. And then also try and learn more about birds from fun resources. So you don't want to do this in a way that's like too stressful. You're not trying to like do homework or anything. You're trying to learn in a fun, safe way. So things that I really like are the Merlin Bird ID app. So with that Bird ID app, you can like identify birds that are in your area. So maybe you're not used to seeing a lot of birds. You can identify them by sound, or it'll give you like some questions on what bird you saw, and it can help you to figure out what bird you're talking about, and it'll give you facts on that bird as well. Also, if you can, like maybe get a physical book of birds local to your area, just so you have something to flip through. It sometimes will have, like the one that I have, has little facts about these birds. So it's just kind of a fun way to learn. And then also, I would suggest looking up like fun videos or podcasts online to learn in a fun, relaxed manner. So a couple of my favorite podcasts to listen to, just for like, these are not specific to birds, but Ologies is a fantastic podcast that has some episodes about birds. And then we also have Relax with Animal Facts is another great podcast that I usually listen to fall asleep. But if I don't, then I get to learn some cool animal facts. Another thing I'm going to recommend, this does have a bird on the picture of the box, so just forewarning, it's a drawn picture though, is this game, Wingspan. So this is a really fun game, in my opinion, and it also is a really fun way to learn a little bit about birds without it being too much. Like it's just, you get a little bit of facts with it, you get a little bit of a vibe of like the type of bird it is. But it just kind of, it's also, you're going to be seeing all these like cute pictures of birds, or if you don't find them cute, like you're just going to see these pictures of birds that hopefully in this kind of format is less intimidating. So I just think it's a well-built game. You can play it by yourself. You can play it with the base game. It's 1 to 5 players. So it's a pretty good number. You can also buy an expansion to play with more. I believe this one is all North American birds, but you can also get expansions for, I think it's Asia and Europe. The other thing that's really great about this game is that it is also available on digital format. I have not tried it yet, but you can get it on your phone or different gaming consoles, and it's got cross-platform multiplayer. So kind of nice. Not a lot of things have that. So yeah, definitely recommend this game. It is a little pricier, like board games are a little pricey, but I would check out like if you have any gaming cafes near you or places that you can try out a game before buying it. I tried it out before I bought it, and I like fell in love with it and was like, I need to buy this. So number 3, for things to improve your understanding and knowledge about birds that I would really recommend is starting to understand the things that you are afraid of and try and kind of learn the logic of them, I guess. Like, I know sometimes it can feel like, wow, this is such a thing that can happen. If it's happened to me once, it could happen again, or just sometimes things happen more because we're thinking about them. Who knows? Like, but by learning about things and understanding how to react to them, we can sometimes actually deal with it better. The way that I kind of am going to compare this is if you were going on a hike and you were in an area where you might see bears. chances are you're going to see signs, or you're going to have some communication somewhere about what to do if you encounter a bear. So it's very good to have that information. Most people that go hiking are in the know of like, it's not very likely that I'm going to come into contact with a bear, but hopefully you have paid attention to what to do if you do see one, so that you can kind of avoid it, or what to do to prevent any bear from coming close to you. So try and think of it like that. So you can skip this part if you need to. I'm going to be talking about geese being aggressive and how to avoid an attack from a goose. And then I'm also going to talk about bird dive bombing. So again, if that freaks you out too much, then you can skip this. But if you do want to learn a little bit about how to prevent or react to these things, then stick around. So Canada geese, that's what we're going to start with. So they can be known for being a little more aggressive, especially when it's around nesting season. So any bird, that's when you're going to be at the most risk of anything happening at all, is if it's that time where they're just trying to protect their young. So this is from a PDF on goose-human conflict. So not that like goose attacks are the primary thing in this PDF. A lot of it is to do with, in general, just kind of preventing geese from being where we don't want them to by businesses, things like that. So how to mitigate a lot of conflict with geese, not just geese attacks, but they do have this really great insert here on what to do if a goose attacks me. So I'm just going to read it word for word here, or as close to word for word as I can without fumbling over things. So waterfowl have excellent vision. Geese seem to pay very close attention to the eyes and body language of humans and other animals. An encounter with an aggressive goose can usually be resolved if you maintain direct eye contact while facing your body directly towards the attacking goose. Never turn your back or shoulders away from the hostile goose, and never close or squint your eyes or block your eyes with a purse or a briefcase. If the goose makes an aggressive move towards you while hissing or spreading out its wings, you should slowly back away while using your peripheral vision to watch for obstacles that you could trip over. Maintain a neutral demeanor towards the goose, so don't yell, swing, kick, or act hostile. At the same time, don't cower, hide your face, turn your back, or run away from the goose. So you just don't want to be over aggressive, because that could cause more confrontation and more aggression. And if a goose flies up towards your face, then duck or move away at a 90-degree angle to the direction of the flight, still facing the attacking goose. So I know that sounds scary, but basically you want to maintain assertiveness. Try and stay calm. I know it's hard, but try and stay calm. Try and keep your body faced towards them, and just don't run away. Just stay looking at them, back away. Another thing to keep in mind that I read was that in terms of injuries, there seemed to be almost more of a concern about injuries from getting too scared and like tripping over something while trying to run away. So just be careful. Be mindful of your surroundings, and just try and de-escalate the aggression as quickly as possible. This one's from birdfact.com. If you can't avoid an attack, stay calm and confident. The natural human response is to turn and run, but facing the bird and backing away is a better strategy. Geese do not attack out of spite, so simply getting out of their way is usually enough to stop the attack. So hopefully that goose talk was not too much. Again, I know it sounds freaky, but it's just good to be armed with what to do, just in case. And for me, it helps to just kind of run through those things so that I know how to kind of logic my way out of it. So the next thing I want to talk about is dive bombing. So that was something that really triggered a lot of the fear for me. So I'm going to talk about how to respond to if a bird dive bombs and how to prevent future dive bombings from happening. So if a bird starts diving towards you, it is scary, right? It does feel freaky, but just remember, like, they're if they're doing it because they feel like they have to protect their young. That's most likely why it's happening. Or if like they have some reason to think that you're being super malicious or something like that. But in general, they're not going to want to do this. It does have risk for the bird. So if the bird starts diving towards you, it's understandably scary. I'm just reading this off of birdful.org. But there are some tips to avoid panic and safely remove yourself from the situation. So number one is you want to remain calm, which is so much easier said than done. So don't scream, don't flail your arms or make sudden movements, because that can actually prolong the encounter by agitating the bird. So try and have a relaxed posture to show the bird that you're not a threat. Again, I know this is hard stuff. Protect your head and your neck. So just have a hat or a helmet if you know that you're kind of in an area where it might happen, or during a time where you think it might happen. You could also use like a backpack, a book, or hands just to protect your head. So number three is to move away slowly. So casually walk away, don't run away, and make sure that you avoid trees and bushes where the bird could be hiding their nest. Resist temptation to swing or swat at the bird as it dives. And then number four is you want to give the bird space. So keep a wide berth around any trees, nests, or food sources. The further you can get away from the protected area, the better. And then five, try and notify anyone if there is like a property owner or if it's on a public property, just so that they know to kind of keep that area cordoned off if possible. So now let's talk about how to avoid future dive bombing. And this one's from birdful.org. So we want to use caution and consider alternative routes when passing through areas where you have previously been dive bombed. So there's also some precautionary measures that you can take, such as wearing a hat or a helmet, opening an umbrella, so it just creates a barrier between you and the bird, travel in groups, remove shiny objects, cover bright clothing, keep pets leashed, make noise, so that you are kind of scaring them away before they kind of swoop down, and then also avoid nesting seasons. So that's when the most likelihood of this ever happening, if it's going to happen, is. I looked at a few other places just to try and see like what their suggestions were. One of them, cover your head and get out of there. Article from NPR. So they were specifically talking about crows here. So one, ignore the birds. Two, avoid areas where you draw their attention. And three, wear a mask with eyes on the back of your head. So crows attack from behind and they don't attack faces. So kind of a weird one, but might be an option if you want to do that. So I just want to remind you that you are not alone if you are afraid of birds, and that it can suck, I know, to be someone who's experiencing something that a lot of people don't. And I just want to hopefully give you some hope that it is something that you can get over in time. I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm never uncomfortable around birds. I still do feel uncomfortable if I like hear a bird flying close to me. The sound of like wings fluttering just gives me the ick. And then also like some birds just look freaky to me. Like they just have a look that does make me uncomfortable. But I've come to realize that discomfort is not inherently a bad thing, and that sometimes by challenging ourselves to really look at what makes us uncomfortable and kind of sit with that discomfort and grow from it, we can become stronger and better people. So I truly believe that discomfort is something that we need in our lives. So I'm not looking at that as a bad thing. I'm just kind of looking at that discomfort head on, acknowledging it and letting it be. And hopefully over time, I will be a little less sensitive to those things. But if not, it's just the way it is. I still am far more fascinated by birds now than I was before. I now really admire them and think they're just so cool. There are so many different types of birds out there, and they all have their own little quirks and their own skill sets, and it's fascinating to me, honestly. So I hope that at some point you get to a point where you can have that same admiration that I do for birds now, and that you don't feel like this fear is something that is in the driver's seat for a lot of your life. Let me know if you have any other tips for getting over this fear, if you've already kind of gone through this and have come out on the other side and now like appreciate birds. I would love to see if you have any tips to leave in the comments. That would be great. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care. Bye.